Alright, we're back, I guess. Me and Squishy Frog here. It probably doesn't seem like it to you people out there in the internets, but I have not filmed a WTF episode for well over a month. Haven't been busy, just kind of recharging because there's a lot out there that needs to be bitched about. So, Squishy Frog, you just sit right there. I said last video I would probably talk about the brand separations and between Raw and SmackDown. And to do that, you gotta kind of go back again to the beginning. Where did the brand separation take place? And really the biggest contributor to the brand separation was the acquisition of WCW, World Championship Wrestling. And this was 2001, early 2001, where it was announced that WCW had been bought by Vince McMahon, which was huge deal, because WCW, for well over almost 2 years, was the #1 wrestling show out there. And it's kind of staggering to hear what the price was, because Vince McMahon bought WCW for, at least to him, a very paltry $2 million. You think about that. When $2 million is just change, I would love to have that job, because it'd be funny too, because it would be funny if they offered it to Vince, and Vince is like, "Oh, only $2 million here. Let me just get my checkbook out and write you a check. There you go. Have fun." So with this merger, acquisition, whatever you want to call it, Vince got it all. He got the names. He got the video. He got the name rights for everything. So really, he bought the competition. And it was funny because ECW had closed down prior to WCW. So all the ECW guys thought, well, I'll just go to WCW, because they're probably hiring. And no sooner did ECW fold than WCW folded. So now you got 100 wrestlers out there, one company to work for. Not everybody's going to get in. And it's sad too, because there was a lot of good talent in WCW and ECW. But the big plan was to actually have WCW operate as its own independent group. It was still going to be a wrestling company, but it was going to be owned by Vince McMahon. So they would have, WCW would have its own TV show, its own pay-per-views, its own wrestlers. It would just be a separate brand from the WWF. And then for like the big pay-per-view matches, like the big events like WrestleManias, the Royal Rumbles, they were all going to kind of get together and just have these big blow-off, these dream matches. And they went so far, like I said, to just make merchandise. They made WCW shirts. They made WCW the banners that hang over the ring. They had turnbuckles with WCW all over it. I mean, they really pumped a lot of money into this. And so, as kind of a preview of things to come, they dedicated one segment, the last segment of Raw, to the rebirth of WCW. And so they put up all the banners and everything, like I said. They brought out a separate announce team. God help me, I don't know who they are. I think one of them was Arn Anderson. I don't know who the other one was. I want to say Mean Gene. Because I don't remember Tony Schiavone ever coming back. But they had their own team and everything like that. So, the debut match for the brand new WCW. Hold on to your hats for this one. Booker T versus Buff Bagwell. Let me rewind that. Booker T versus Buff Bagwell. I have nothing against Booker T. I think Booker T was one of the more talented men out there. Definitely deserved everything that he got. He proved that he could be a world champion. He was a 5-time WCW champion. And if you ask him, he'll tell you. But they put him in the ring with Buff Bagwell. Buff Bagwell. Marcus fucking Alexander Buff Bagwell. And Icky's playing with a golf ball. And he just shook the camera. Buff Bagwell! Buff Bagwell sucks. I never liked Buff Bagwell. The funniest thing, for anybody that's an insider, Buff Bagwell was a stripper. Like, he was like a Chippendales dancer, I think, before he became a wrestler. Yeah. Buff Bagwell. According to Chris Jericho's book, it was originally supposed to be they were going to put Lance Storm and Booker T in the match because Lance Storm and Booker T had a big feud before WCW shut down. But they decided to go with Buff Bagwell for name value, for marquee value. Yeah. I watched this match. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good either. And the crowd shit all over this match. I mean, they took a big old steaming turd right on this match. And for a number of reasons. Again, going back to Chris Jericho's book. He said that Bagwell and Booker T didn't know how to wrestle a WWF style match. And if you don't know what that is, if you watch any kind of WWF match, even now, it's pretty much set the same way. The good guy gets offense, then the bad guy gets offense. Good guy comes back, they go home. Either good guy wins or bad guy wins. It's pretty straightforward. In WCW, if you got hit, you went down. Didn't matter what time during the match it was. If you got hit, you went down. So really, I guess they were just dropping back and forth, really not building any kind of momentum. And again, the crowd was shitting all over it. But you have to realize, and this is what I think happened, they put a WCW match on WWF TV. And for years, as a WWF fan myself, we had been trained to hate anything involving WCW. If it had WCW on it, we spit on it. So of course they're going to boo these guys, because they're the enemy. You know, if you're a loyal fan, you're probably wondering, okay, why are we watching this? Why aren't we watching some other guy? Who's around, like Steve Austin, The Rock, you know, Undertaker? Why aren't we watching these guys? Why are we watching these dudes? It would be like going to a Motorhead concert, and you rock out to Motorhead, and they leave the stage, and you're expecting them to come out for an encore, and they said, "All right, everyone, it's time for the encore," and they bring out fucking Miley Cyrus or Justin Bieber, or somebody that does not fit. Does not fit that groove. You know, imagine if Motorhead was playing and they finished up, they did like Ace of Spades was their last song. They walked off stage. And then suddenly here comes Miley Cyrus out to do the encore. That place would fucking riot. They'd riot so hard. And that's pretty much what happened. And now you have Vince McMahon, who had just pumped millions of dollars into revamping WCW. And now he believes, well, we can't do this. None of these guys know how to wrestle the way I want them to. So now we have to do something else. So they're sitting around like, all right, well, this whole WCW thing was cool, but how can we take this great idea that would generate millions of dollars and just shit all over it and just totally ruin it for everybody involved? I know. Let's just take the whole idea and compress it into 3 months. And that's what they do with the WCW invasion. Oh, what a time to be alive. Oh, what a fucking time to be alive. I hated this. Okay. I believe it started at the King of the Ring. It might have started earlier, but it really started at King of the Ring when Booker T attacked Steve Austin. And, well, you have to go back. You have to go back a little further. When the night WCW was bought, and they announced it, Vince came out and he was saying how like he owns the competition now. Like, I own WCW. I own my own competition. So, what do? Well, I could fire the people I don't like. Sounds good. And then suddenly, Shane McMahon comes out. And he's down in, I guess, Fort Lauderdale, wherever WCW is at. And he says, Dad, sorry to break up this little, splooge fest for yourself, but there's a McMahon name on that contract, but it doesn't say Vince. It says Shane McMahon. So Shane McMahon has bought WCW. Squishy frog glasses. Yeah, so Shane McMahon pulled off a coup. He signed the contract, and now he owns WCW. Okay, I'm gonna stop you here. Let's talk kayfabe. let's believe that this actually could happen. Shane McMahon, he walks into Titan Towers, and he learns that his father is going to publicly denounce WCW and just bury it, because he owns it now. Well, Shane would go to the lawyer, the family lawyers, and say, well, I want to see that contract. And the lawyers would say, okay, here it is, and we can look over it. And Shane, what? He has a pen in his hand and he trips and falls and scribbles his name. I'm pretty sure you can't do this. I'm no lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that you can't do that. Am I wrong? If Vince McMahon has already bought the company, the contract should have all been signed. Shane should never have been able to put his name anywhere. I could be wrong. I don't know. Like I said, I'm no lawyer. Any lawyers out there can help me out. But this is wrestling, so normal rules need not apply. And now, Shane McMahon owns WCW. So now we fast forward to the King of the Ring. And Booker T attacks Steve Austin. And Shane McMahon is running out the door with Booker T. Because now it's on. And slowly, they start filtering in WCW guys to just attacking people. But, again, well, I'll hold off on that, but they finally admit that, okay, yes, WCW guys are starting to come in to attack WWF guys. And there was one point where there was a bunch of WCW guys out there beating up, I forget who. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, Tommy Dreamer and Rob Van Dam come out of the crowd and start beating up everybody. And they start beating up the two guys, or maybe the WCW guys weren't there, but Tommy Dreamer and Van Dam, they're out there. They're beating somebody up. And suddenly here comes a bunch of WWF guys. And if you don't catch it right away, if you go back and watch it again, you'll see it, but all the WWF guys that come out to save the two guys getting beat up are all ECW guys. Former ECW guys. So, naturally, what do you think happens? Yeah. Admiral Akbar. It's a trap! And the two guys get beat up. I think it's like Jericho and Kane. I want to say it's Jericho and Kane. I don't know. But, and at this point, Paul Heyman is doing commentary because Jerry Lawler left with his girlfriend when she got fired. And of course, JR, the awesome commentator that he is, he's like, what the hell's going on here? What the hell's going on? I have no idea what's going on. And Paul Heyman says, you want to know what's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. And he gets in the ring and he talks about how ECW went under, nobody gave a shit, and now ECW, they're back. He's like, if anybody's going to invade this fucking company, it's going to be us. And we're going to run WCW out of here because we're going to take it over. And again, this is a perfect opportunity to make a great storyline. Because yes, you have WCW invading the WWF and attacking them. And at the same time, you have ECW attacking both. It's basically what it was, what the brand wars were. It was WCW against the WWF, and ECW were taking their pot shots at each other, at both of them. It would have been a great idea. But of course, great ideas and the WWF are very few and far between. And so, the WCW guys come out later, the ECW guys come out, and they're going to have a big throwdown. And again, I think there's two other people in the ring, WWF guys. And then suddenly, like, WCW's this way, ECW's facing each other this way, and then they all like, turn around to the two WWF guys and beat the shit out of them. And Vince is just aghast. He does not know what to do. And Paul Heyman comes out and says, or no, Paul and like Shane McMahon come out and say, like, yeah, we fucked you people over. Like, we are together in this, and we're going to put Vince McMahon out of business. And, oh, by the way, Vince, there's a new owner of ECW. You might know who it is. It's your daughter, Stephanie McMahon. And Stephanie comes out, and she's all that shit-eating grin. She's like, ha ha ha, we fucked you over, Dad. Again, you're telling me that Stephanie McMahon went to the lawyers because Vince owns ECW and just signed her name on the contract. Just whited out Vince's name and put her name. Okay. I'll buy it, I guess. But okay, but going back to what I was originally going to talk about. This invasion between WCW and ECW, now called the Alliance, I believe it would have worked. It would have worked two ways. The one way would be to have top established names leading this charge. You know, who are some of the top guys in WCW? Well, you had, I'll just go ahead and say it, Hulk Hogan, Jeff Jarrett, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Ric Flair, Lex Luger, Sting. Those are all the big names from WCW. If they were leading this charge, it would have been far more entertaining. But guess what? Somebody fucked up. Because they gave them a choice. They said to all the WCW contracted wrestlers, they said, you can either finish out your contract at whatever you're making, whatever you were making, and future endeavors. Whatever happens, happens. We might hire you, we might not. Or you can take a new contract for far less money, and we'll get you on TV right away. Because again, they were planning on having their own TV show. So, of course the old established guys, they're not going to take that deal. They're making millions. I know Hulk Hogan was damn near making $2 million, maybe more. Of course they're not going to take it. They're going to sit at home and do nothing. An idiot would do that. But then you've got the younger guys who, they got to eat. You know, they got to support their family. So of course they're going to take the deal. And so the invasion consisted of the young, barely recognizable WCW guys. The two biggest names that they had during the entire invasion that were from WCW were Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page. That's it. The rest of them, you could say Chris Kanyon, but he wasn't a real established star. But all the younger guys, like Sean O'Hare and Chuck Palumbo and Lance Storm from ECW and WCW. Can you name anybody from WCW that stuck around that long? Because I'm having a hard time. And it makes sense what they did. So, it made sense to put them with another group. So they put them with ECW. So now they at least look like an invading army. And of course, during an episode of Raw, like, they're giving these really like impassioned, empowering speeches. Like, they have the WWF locker room in a room, and like the Undertaker walks in with Vince McMahon, because the Undertaker's like the locker room leader, and he's giving this like impassioned speech, like it's one thing to sit around and get your ass, like it's one thing to go out there and fight and get your ass beat, but it's another thing to just sit around and do nothing. And this was directed towards Steve Austin because Steve Austin had turned heel. He had joined with Vince McMahon, and he was doing this kind of bizarre, insane type thing where he was hugging Vince McMahon and he was trying to be all friendly with him. And Vince is like, I don't need that Steve. I need the fucking badass Steve Austin. I need the rattlesnake. And Austin, like, his feelings were hurt because he's like, Vince doesn't want to be my friend anymore. And they kept showing Steve Austin in this bar. I guess he was nearby. And he was watching TV and he saw the Undertaker's speech and he's like, yes, yes, I'm back. And he goes to the arena and he kicks ass and it's the old Steve Austin. And then we go to Invasion, the pay-per-view that had like WCW and the WWF fighting each other. And there's this big tag team match. And that was the night that Steve Austin turned. I'd never seen anybody, well, except for TNA, but I'd never seen anybody at that time go from good guy, bad guy, good guy, bad guy in that amount of time. It was months. And so now they have Steve Austin as part of the alliance. And that's when you knew this ship was splitting apart. Because now they started filling in the alliance with WWF guys. Like, they were defecting over. But during like every show, like Raw, SmackDown, like any of the smaller shows that were on TV, the alliance was dominating. They were dominating. But at pay-per-views, the payoff matches, the matches that matter, where they have shit that's important, that's on the line, the WWF was just slaughtering them. And you can't do that. And that goes back to another thing, that the invasion could have worked because WCW had the younger guys. They had the younger talent. You would think that the younger, hungrier talent that didn't have these cushy jobs would just start steamrolling over these guys. But they weren't. It just seemed like every time you turn around and the alliance was getting some kind of headway, they just got their asses beat again. And it really kind of boiled down to Survivor Series when they had the big 10-man tag. It was, I'm trying to think. It was The Rock, Chris Jericho, The Undertaker, Kane, and I think Big Show against Steve Austin. This was the alliance, by the way. The WCW ECW Invasion Group. Spot how many people actually were from WCW and ECW. You had Steve Austin, Kurt Angle, Shane McMahon, Booker T, Rob Van Dam. There's your sign. There's your sign that this was not working. When half of the alliance was WWF guys, they should have just threw their hands up in the air and said, okay, we're done. We're officially abandoning this story. We are done. And at Survivor Series, the alliance loses because the winner of the 10-man tag, their companies would stay afloat. And yeah, guess who lost? You thought Vince McMahon was going to lose? You don't know wrestling. So the next night, Vince comes out and he's gloating because he's finally buried his competition. And Shane McMahon comes out, and he actually plays it pretty mellow. He's like, "You beat me, Dad. You were the better man. Congratulations." And he walks off. Stephanie, of course, grovels and pleads for her job, and Vince is like, "Fuck you, get out of here." And he fires Paul Heyman, too, and Jerry Lawler comes back. Oh, by the way, the speech right before Survivor Series that Paul Heyman gave on SmackDown to Vince McMahon, one of the best promos ever. I don't know if it was... I'm sure it was a worked shoot where he was told to go out there and say certain things, and then he just went off script, and it just worked so well. I don't know, but one of the best, because it really was the truth. Look it up. Look up on YouTube, just like Paul Heyman shoots on Vince McMahon. And there'll be, one of the options will be a SmackDown where he just goes off on McMahon. It's a great promo. Paul Heyman's one of the best mouths out there. He's just great at everything he says. And so, I'll finish this up. So now, what do? They decide, well, this whole invasion thing could have worked. We're just going to do it a little differently. So, from now on, after WrestleMania, what is it, 18? 17 or 18? I think it's 18. We're going to have a draft. And the draft is for who goes to Raw and who goes to SmackDown. And they're going to be our competing groups. So, you had Raw with its own group, its own people. You had SmackDown with its own people. And they weren't going to intermingle. The only person that was going to intermingle was the Undisputed Champion. They were the one that was going to bounce back and forth. And I brought this up before. So, you had guys that were exclusive to Raw and guys exclusive to SmackDown. So, you could have fans kind of battle back and forth, which it was nowhere near like it was, okay? This was not WCW against the WWF. You didn't have guys saying, "Raw rules, motherfuckers! Blow me, asshole! SmackDown's where it's at!" You know? You didn't get that. Because you could watch both, okay? They weren't on the same night. If they put them on the same night, that might have worked, but they didn't. And, yeah, for a while there, it was okay, because, like I said, Raw, when they first broke, Raw had the Intercontinental Champion, I believe the Tag Champions went back and forth, too, for a little bit, and then they broke that off. And the Women's Champion. So they had the Intercontinental and the Women's Champion on Raw. SmackDown had the U.S. title and the Cruiserweight title. But then, like I said, eventually both shows had their own titles. Like, they brought the world title back just out of the blue. Ric Flair says, "Here you go, Triple H, you're the world champion." So you had world champion, world tag champions, Intercontinental champion, women's champion on Raw. SmackDown, you had WWE champion, WWE tag team champions, U.S. champion, Cruiserweight for a while. Then it became the Divas title. Yeah, and then you already know my feelings about that. But it was unnecessary. Because they don't do it now. I think they pretty much abandoned the concept now. Because they don't do it anymore. You could see guys on Raw and SmackDown both. So the brand separation is gone. But they would dedicate an entire night of Raw to the draft. And they would bring out these big coups. Like, I remember one year, they had, I think, Batista and John Cena. This is right after WrestleMania 21. They had, Cena was the WWE champion. Batista was world champion. And the very first draft pick for Raw was John Cena. And so, like, that was the big coup for the entire night, that Raw had both world champions on their show. But then, eventually, Batista went over to SmackDown, so it meant nothing. They like to say that it was completely at random. I call bullshit on that. there was one draft where Evolution was together. Triple H, Ric Flair, Randy Orton, and Batista, and they drew, like, SmackDown drew Triple H's name. And so he had to go to SmackDown. He was there for one night. And then the very next week on Raw, they're like, Paul Heyman traded Triple H for 3 guys or whatever. So, fuck those 3 guys that got traded for Triple H. He's worth 3 guys. Dickhead. So, my personal opinion on the draft, or the brand separation, when it worked, it was okay. Because they traded off pay-per-views. And again, I like that. You could have a year's worth of pay-per-views, but each group had their own. Like, Raw would have every other month. Like, WrestleMania, Raw would have the next month. And then SmackDown the month after. Then Raw, SmackDown. They would get to a big pay-per-view like SummerSlam. It would be a co-promotional, like Raw and SmackDown. And then it would switch back to just Raw, SmackDown. But the Raw roster was way stronger, I felt, every single time. The bigger names were always on Raw. SmackDown had the younger guys. They had the cruiserweights and they had the new upcoming stars. But if you don't have that star power, nobody's going to watch it. And nobody really did. SmackDown, I always felt, was like the bottom shelf. Like the big leagues are Raw. SmackDown is just kind of here. And I know that's not fair to the people on SmackDown. And I say that just now after watching a SmackDown and commenting that it was way better than Raw. Because it is. It's way better. I liked it when it worked. But then when they just started showing up at random, I hated it. Like, how many times did Big Show and Jericho say they were leaving Raw forever, and then they just show up the next week? Nothing was ever held accountable for. So, there's my long-winded rant about the brand separation. Didn't like it. I liked it when it worked. Didn't like the alliance angle. Kiss my ass. I hated that. I hated it with a passion. And the funniest thing was that they moved Austin over to be a heel. Austin can never be a heel. Steve Austin could never go back to being a heel. Ever. Even siding with Vince McMahon, people still cheered him. The only way, I think Mick Foley even proved this, that the only way people would boo Steve Austin is if he changed everything about him. He would have to come out in a 3-piece suit, and people would then boo him. But he was still coming out doing Steve Austin stuff. He's just that entertaining. The man could never be booed again. I'm total belief of that. But I have rambled on for at least an hour, I'm sure, but not sure what I'll do next. I'll have to look. I'll have to do some research to find something. I have some ideas. Somebody gave me some good ideas. I'll have to look on YouTube, see if I can find some stuff. But thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting the channel. If you like it, the brew reviews are still going strong. This is still going strong. I'm gonna try and maybe do some more videos about other things. I'm not 100% sure. I'm still in the works on that. But on behalf of Squishy Frog here, I'm GMC, and thanks for watching.